Please welcome Kareem Ettouney of Media Molecule to tell us more. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, it's absolutely, you know, I've got my Beatles T-shirt. The idea of creativity and how to design and express and has been warped a little bit by isolating it from the simpler story. You know, there are words like masterpiece, talent, and stuff, which are good words, but they're not the truth. The truth of like something like the Beatles is that they were a bunch of kids playing in Germany 10 hours a day, covers of Elvis and Chuck and all the previous talents until they got good. And then they started doing their ones to stand out. So it's a simpler, more practical story. We are, the Little Big Planet was our first project, and the idea of sharing the tools that make video games or make entertainment, animation. Some people did wedding proposals. It's was our first attempt into discovering and dissolving the line between input and output, between taking stuff in and recycling back out. Creativity is no different than talking, you know. It's this and making anything really. It's just you take stuff in and stuff. And Little Big Planet was our beginning. Today I'm going to touch on our new one, and we've been working on it for a while now. It's the same evolution of Little Big Planet, but this time user-generated content is not a new thing to talk about introducing anymore. Like when we did Little Big Planet, there was only MySpace. There wasn't even YouTube or Facebook. Today, everybody takes a photo, posts it, or makes a video and shares it. Or the concept of user publishing is a human right now. And things have become more meaningful. What started being a bit indulgent, they started to become more serious and deep and political and whatever. So there is a movement now in UGC to a deeper place. And from a creative point of view, we are tapping to every user interface concept that we can imagine and mixing metaphors to try to get inspiration more from performance again, like to try to bring that back into the digital medium. But before I go into dreams, I want to zoom out a little bit about attitudes and design attitudes. We make a lot of virtual worlds in video games or in CG in general. And this is from my graduation. I was a set designer for, I learned set design for cinema and theater. And the first beginnings were like architectural and space and research and zoning. That was my first, in the beginning of video games, taking the architectural approach in world design and making maps and schematics. Research again, like, you know, when we were talking earlier about taking photos, and you can't, you know, I was designing a city here, and it was for a game called Fable, and wanted to do something like Saint Michel style, and we need to look at what's out there, all the rationale and the reasoning and the wisdom in the decisions that make a city. And then I started designing the city from a Google Map kind of approach. Before, you know, even the rationale of roads, for example, are not just related to I need a road here. It's usually beside rivers. It's usually in parts of the land that is the shortest way between the important points. There's a rationale to cities, and if you adopt some of that in your design, there's a certain believability that comes out of that. And then, you know, drawing the concepts So these are more, and that was an American town. I was designing for an sort of idealized Americana, Norman Rockwell style town. And it was gigabytes and gigabytes of research material. And I put some of this memory lane stuff in the presentation because it's very essential to the point I want to make. I'm more focusing today on tapping into your inner self-expression and finding, believing and feeling and stuff like that. But that has to sit on top of the rational part. And I always forget to talk about that bit, and I go into the next bit too soon. And it's there's diminishment in the point because the same principle of like the Beatles copying Chuck Berry first, you know, it's very important that there is an amount of time spent in getting the structures and making use and making a lot of benefit from all the accumulated knowledge the world has to offer. Like in the design style in this one, I really wanted to not only do authenticity. Like this is a typical house in the 40s, but if you were an old-fashioned kind of person, while this was a house in the 40s, if you were the trendy end, buying the Bauhaus and buying the new design Art Deco stuff. And I wanted the interiors to be a mashup of the two because I felt like that's kind of like what our houses are like. So you can add your own thing on top of even such an anal sort of like I was younger at the time and I was like, you know, it's very much about authenticity. But I think even then I like the point here where just mixing is the beginning of personality. These are some of the concepts. We're very inspired by Norman Rockwell in this one. And now this is what I do. Like, so this is the beginning of the actual presentation. But I wanted to do the history tiny bit because it grounds it. So now I start designing in paint because I sort of have some of these things in the back of the mind and you know, like there is a huge untapped untrained part of our decision-making criteria, which is the feeling, and that can be very cheesy if you know you don't train it. It gets training too, like hours and hours of oil paint and stuff, doing many paintings starts giving you sort of like the wisdom of like marks, like this mark feels right, this mark feels wrong. I don't no reason. It just, you know, and you start believing it's like that's it. This kind of way of designing allows you to find order in chaos. You can bring designs out of random gestures and things, allowing things to come through when you get, you know, I sort of did the swirly movement and then it felt a bit like a dolphin. I don't know why, but and then a concept emerges out of that. I think in digital and in finding personality and identity, that's an ingredient that I would love to seed and encourage and celebrate. It's not the only ingredient because there are a lot of other factors that need to come together to allow you to speak. Like if you know, if you are the most poetic person in the world but you have zero grammar, you will just not be able to articulate your points. So there's a minimum of other disciplines needed for more subtle things to come through. But allowing the gestural and the emotional part to play a part. People are very embarrassed by that bit. It's like, you know, everybody has to give very grown-up reasons to justify your rational. It's like, why do that? And it's, oh, because the world will explode if we don't do that. It has to be very technical and very, and that rationale is fine. But no, very rarely people say like, because it feels right. You know, it's like, who do you think you are? You know, like there is an annoying embarrassment from that rationale, because it's irrational, and it's a shame, because it's a big part of who we are, and it has a lot of magic in it. Now I will play you our new tool. This is a fast-forward glimpse into how we change the interface of 3D creation, making it more like playing with clay and using 3D pastels, if you like. I'm using shapes, I'm cutting and adding those shapes. And we wanted our 3D creation to be very attractive to watch. Usually 3D tools are menus and buttons and very atomic operations and concepts that are just inhuman. We made a bunch of cubes, cut and added them together, a bunch of spheres in green, copy and paste, move around, and you start getting a bit of a scene very fast. And because we use a way of, like here I'm changing the finish of the world to be more impressionistic. That is very new in the digital world. And nicely inaccurate. I'm just swiping my hand. This little orange dude is the cursor, like we call it the imp. It's a characterful funk thing. And I'm using that to capture my every gesture. So on the outside, I'm just moving my hand, and it's moving like that in a one-to-one way. This is one of our tools. We're tracking the movement by cameras. And if you don't have a camera, we still support using the normal controllers to create. But what I'm showing here is the act of not having a plan. I just started with a few cubes and colors and finding textures, and kind of like the same mentality of the paintings before. And then you change midway and you kind of go, I'm going to try this finish and see what it looks like. And I like this one. It's like 3D Turner, I call it. It's quite, and then you sort of a bit of that here, a bit of that there. Never before was that the mindset of digital. Like the digital is very intentional. It's like I know exactly what I want to the decimal, and I'm executing it. While this is allowing one to sort of think while doing it, because the tools are more analog and capturing my every move and every gesture, and the feedback is instantaneous. So I can say, no, not that. I don't like it. I like it. Rather than it takes me half an hour to do that, so I'm just going to be in a different state of mind. Therapeutic as well, like it's quite a different take on creation. And we basically have our team doing the same thing for all disciplines, for animation, for music, for sound and game logic and programming, but trying as much where possible, because we haven't killed it in every area. Some areas it's hard to innovate fully, but as much as we can, we try to make the experience of digital authoring something at least exciting to watch. Like when we see a caricature artist in the street, people gather around and watch them because they're sexy. It's like, cool, I love that shit. And there's something quite amazing about watching. I think children, young people, the way you look at a dancer or you look at something beautiful, that's the first way of learning. So if just by looking, and here I wanted to demonstrate the architectural end of the project, because it's not only the tool that makes Turner-esque kind of landscapes. You can go to the other extreme, turn the grid on, and do quite geometric formations. Again, in quite a trippy, fun way, but to see the yin and yang of 3D spatial vocabulary. And I just made that one bit, and then I'm copying and pasting it in an architectural kind of sensibility. And you get like your sort of Blade Runner brutalist type building. Very, very exciting way of quickly sketching your virtual worlds, and then you can send it again to a painterly place if you want, or keep it tight. And that is the glimpse into our new one, Dreams. Here I wanted to show a case study trying to of design, where hopefully the purpose of it is to show the different gears you do to reach an innovative take on a concept. We wanted to do a space that was inspired by science fiction, and yet we wanted to have an original take on it. So the first step is the research. We look at like all our the stuff that we've grown up with and we're fans of. We go back to the roots. We looked at architecture, deconstruction. Zaha Hadid, she left us last year, and we were looking at her work. Old designers like Ken Adams. This guy did all the Bond movies in the 60s. I love this guy. And modern abstract designs. All that is just the food, you know, to see what we can do to do a fresh take on a science fiction genre. Other than obviously the story and the functionality, the research material that we went through, and then in-house we started drawing, painting, and doing different kind of responses to the first responses to the material. Designs was like story elements, and at this point in the story, this will happen and that will happen. Many attempts, and you know, like these were all the discarded concepts that we were looking at, going from abstract, like some of our team we just let loose, and because the tool, as I was showing you earlier, is fast and expressive, people are able to do their designs in relatively fast times. And I think speed matters, you know, like any medium is crippled if it cannot describe what it wants fast. Like a musician can record and do all the bells and whistles, but ultimately they can sing you the melody, or they can pick up a guitar and hear it sounds a bit like that and go. You know, you have to be able to sketch so you can remain courageous and remain throw away with it all. This is a sort of very highbrow. One of our amazing artists, Ramses, did that one, and that is inspired by deconstruction, sort of like eco-futurism. Zaha Hadid inspired spaces, interior designs. Then we started getting interesting. Like this was starting to get to a new place. The elements are mixing up and coming together in generating compelling new stuff starting to emerge. But there was no twist. I still, we didn't feel like, even from a message, sort of like a statement. So, you know, one of the designs that one of our people, Menlu, did was that one. And that inspired me to draw a picture. I was in one of the meetings, and we came up with a take on the sort of digital environment that is more inspired by agriculture and organic formations. Now, what if we make a digital forest? You know, that was interesting because there's a sort of like contrasting position. Something, so we make it all out of you know, architectural sensibilities and high tech stuff, but coming together to create a jungle, and that was fun, a fun twist that came at some point in the process. So another ingredient in the mix. So, you know, mixing like those sort of Star Trek looking windows with a structure that is a tree, and it gets its energy in a way like water. And the team started really riffing with it and producing stuff that had a freshness to it. We were getting closer, and that's a video of a more late version of it, still changing, but we felt that the ingredients of research, homage, originality, twist, just practice, trial and error, led to something that had an interesting, compelling result. And that's just the story of one scene that takes 2 minutes in an experience, and you never see it again. But I thought it had an interesting story, and it benefited from a mixture of things, the rational, the expressive, the arrival of a twist, and between these elements we reach something that I think is an interesting story. This part of the presentation I wanted to prepare just for you guys, which is how can one be useful and say stuff that might be helpful. And I thought what is helpful to me now and ever, most of these are everlasting dilemmas that we all are trying to survive and deal with. This one here is knowledge. How do we survive knowledge? Knowledge is an ocean. You kind of go like, do your research, and then you drown. You just go to the library and you start. I'm doing some research, and then you kind of go like, oh my God, there's so much there, and it overwhelms you, it consumes you, and you could end up becoming a conservative, a person only interested in authenticity, which is, you know, not enough. But so how do we handle that? How do we handle that? And how do we get there? Like someone like Oscar Wilde, who says the coolest stuff, like that is like an example of reaching a point with your medium that is timeless, cool and relevant to all generations and all times. How do we get there? How do we handle data in a way that comes out in that way, that level of ninja-ness? And this is my little one, and we're drawing together, and the realization that I had just having a kid is that we're born free and fearless, no insecurities yet, because there is no knowledge. So there's no anticipation. It's like little animals. They're always in the now. There's never like, I'm really stressed. You know, like they don't know. The aspiration, the vision, all that stuff. So one of the problems that we have as a result of knowledge is becoming too conceptual. And we start smoking that dope too much and becoming slaves, addicts to our concepts. You know, it's like disappointed all the time. The brilliant thing about remembering the attitude of children is realizing that fear is not natural. It's something that we're born without. I go to live drawing classes all the time, And I find it very interesting. Sometimes people who join for the first time in the class say the same sentence every time. The first time joiners will say, they'll be very apologetic and very embarrassed and keeping on justifying, like, I haven't done this for a long time. It's like, you know, I'm very rusty. I'm like, it's like, you don't go and learn like Japanese or something and you apologize for not being able to be a Japanese poet. You know, it's like, dude, you know, it's we are not embarrassed when it comes to language at all. Everybody feels they have the right to speak. Everybody has a take on stuff and talks, and even though they're not poets, you know, but we still do it. We don't feel only the talented talkers get to talk, you know. Design is the same. It's just another language, vocabulary, practice time. Picasso has the same thing that my kid has, but he also has knowledge in between. So he managed to deal with the ocean of knowledge to become one of those by preserving that and making it come back. But how do we do that? That is a mystery. I don't know. You know, just like that is the situation. But that is the thing that you're looking for again, to find the child again with the benefit of having, you know, Wacom tablets and cool stuff, toys, and more information and more isms and know-how and research and all the bits that are essential to language. But we try to not become over-conceptual with it. Picasso was producing so prolifically, like the Beatles analogy again, like the prolificness is the only hope, the only way to find your good stuff. I know if you like it, it shouldn't be a problem as well, because it's meditative anyway. You know, it's quite cool that, you know, like I like this ballet dancer picture. It's dramatic, but ballet dancers are like the most light, beautiful looking things, yet they're obsessive, the practice. And this guy in the middle was Gustave Doré, and I love these sentences, just like the all reiterating the same concept that you must have heard and will hear all the time about no way around quantity. And there is such wisdom in it, because in the 100th time you're doing the same thing, a concept that you heard on day one makes sense now. Oh, yeah, there is a hole now that this concept goes in. But that concept without that hole means nothing. It's like concepts like live in the now or inner peace. It's like, what the fuck? You know, like they're good concepts, but they don't mean anything unless there's a hole the size of that concept in your system. And that only comes from quantity. The people like, and then you're allowed. This slide is about indulgence. You're allowed to be indulgent as long as it has as long it sounds. I don't mean like the Janis Joplin and the blues are all about like their pain, you know, the hurt that her personal pain, or Persepolis, the Iranian girl who wrote her story about her childhood. So you can go, who cares, you know? But it's not like the Kardashians. It's like more about a girl talking about the change of a society from a liberal society to a radicalized one through her family. It gave the world an insight into what actually happened in Iran. And it's a very good animation as well. So even the personal bit was not a me kind of thing. It meant more. Rubens was obsessed with the body. This was his second wife, and he painted her over and over. This Three Graces, it's in the Prado, and it's her 3 times. If you see that live, I don't think paint has ever reached higher levels. You know, you look at them now with today's aesthetics, and you might think, that just looks like a Baroque painting. But actually, when you see the live one, the paint, what the paint is doing, I haven't seen anything like that. It's alchemy. It's done by, you know, some level of understanding. So he got to indulge in drawing his loved one, and like sort of he was infatuated by her, Helena, I think her name, but the magic of his craft with the indulgent works, or like Janis Joplin way of singing, was very essential, and her obsession with Otis and the Redding and the sort of black sounding the blues was good for this girl from Texas who was like bullied and stuff. So it's not only that. It's not enough. It's not enough to have a bit of a story, and it has to come together with something else. Michelangelo only drew men, even when he drew women, but he did it very well. So he basically changed every concept. I love this picture here because it has one of the best toes ever drawn. Toes are very hard, and the nail especially, I find it impossible. And this is the Libyan Sibyl in the Sistine Chapel, and the level of obsessiveness of designing each finger that Michael had is unsurpassed. Again, okay, you get to draw his men all the time, even if the commission is like end of the world, the Bible, this, the Genesis, whatever. But so you can change the task, you can change the commission to suit your own indulgence, as long as there is eternal wisdom to your way of doing it. So it doesn't just become a sort of me. Collaboration is something I just want to touch on. You're going to all, if you aren't already, collaborate. And that's a pain in the ass, like there is a lot of conflict. But the Beatles, and they had conflict, they ended up breaking apart. But you just have to hear the harmonies and the songwriting genius that was going on to sort of still believe in the beauty of it. Manage the conflict, manage the sort of duels, like all the time. It's like, I must win this debate. There's the way I think collaboration can be very fruitful is not having empathy and not only believing that person exists to destroy your narrative. That person has woke up in the morning to disagree with me. No. That person has they're the hero of their movie. In their movie, they're the main character. So that's a thought that works for me. Like I kind of go like, you're not trying to annoy me. You are just being. You're in your own story, trying to exist and prove things and save the world. And so it's essential to not get into the mindset of like they are stopping me. It's boring and it's killing. It will eat you up. So instead, it's much more useful to use the time for something better. The last point is this picture where this tapestry was in Egypt, from Egypt, and this tapestry was done by a brilliant experiment by a guy called Ramses, like Ramses. He founded a school in the countryside in the 30s. And they got people from the very poor sort of villages, young kids, and they taught them the craft of tapestry making. And the guy who founded that place was from very high education, like got his education from Paris at the time. And his theory was like, there is art inside people. Like, we don't teach anything, we just teach the craft, put them directly in nature and see what happens. But the catch was, it wasn't just a sort of tapestry churning kind of model. They let the kids develop style for 20 years. Not just like, here is the picture, blow that up, let's sell it to the tourists. No. It was fine art. It was like an incubator to see what will happen. 20 years later, the styles emerged, and the people, and they all signed the pieces, and they're sold. They're very expensive, and the artist gets 50%. It's a very different model. It's not like, you know, your sort of tourist abusing thing. And the second generation of artists in that school, they got the first generation to teach them, and they started realizing that the second one is starting to become derivative. So they went back to the first idea that the art is within. And some of the results I saw there were like similar to Gauguin and stuff like that. So that was a very good example of like, there is stuff in us already. And the Bauhaus, obviously, the other extreme, which is celebrating everything humanity has arrived at and reiterating it, learning to control and weld new materials to recycle tradition, is how they put it, I think. So we always trying to find the blend between the other of a boat, the reason, and the wild wind sail bit. I stole that from Gobran. It's kind of a nice ending. Thank you. Cool.
Okay, we have a couple of minutes for questions if anybody has any. One at the back there.
Dreams is obviously being created as a tool to go out to people and consumers, but it's very clear that you and your team are creating it with a very clear conceptual approach to design. How do you intend to translate that approach or offer that approach to the consumers and the players in the hope that they sort of grasp it with the same clear vision that you and your team are building it with?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. It's the key is the way we packaging Dream is that it's an entertainment hub. So if you put the disc in and you don't know any of this create business at all, you will get like a Netflix style browsing experience of game after game after game that you can surf from one to the other for the rest of your life and not even have to delve into anything else. Then you get to discover, I could like the game, I could share the game, all the social networky stuff. Like I could recommend the game to my, if you like this, you like that kind of stuff. And then you can find out, I can make a playlist of my favorite games and link them together as a new game. Like the first sort of like, the consumer is starting to make a mixtape. Like again, human right. Everybody did mixtapes, not only like, you know, the musicians. So the system is designed and presented in a way that has a gradualness to it. If you bought it and you want to go straight into sculpture, you just go and you'll get the videos and the forums and dive straight into that. But that's the converted. That's the easier target. I want the animation tools, give me them. But for human beings, just get the thing, enjoy what people have to offer. Little Big Planet, I think, has got more than 15 million games. So if you just put it in and you just want to play, like surfing YouTube or the web, just go in, you start by like zombie ninjas, and then you sort of end up in some other spaceships and things. Then you kind of go, I can take all the assets used in that level, add to my favorites. I can decorate my own personal space with some of these things. So there is a lot of entertainment, watching, enjoying, voyeuring is the first entry point. The second thing is like, because it's attractive to watch, so we are going to, it suits very much this Twitch generation of like posting and showing and getting like people learning by watching. So there are, and then the last point is that Media Molecule are doing a game using Dreams that is like we did in Little Big Planet, a full experience that you has our style of video game making and our humor, our sort of characters and stuff that we introduced Dream with, showing a bit of a cross-section of its variety. But in the game we're making, we inject in stealth some creative bits in the adventure to give people as well a taster. So there is so many ways of getting the taster without having to be, you must be an animator. You know, like that is, there's no way of like changing the consumer into that.
Any other questions? One along at the back there. I'd like to thank all the people actually passing along the mic. You were very helpful too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Hi, I'm curious because I can see that it's a very empowering tool, and you can do a lot with it. Is there any way to export what you produce in Dreams and into the, for example, Maya or ZBrush and work from that?
Definitely, the code is written in a way that supports that. The hurdle is legal. It's not really technological. We wrote the system in a way that you can make a game in Dream and publish it in a standalone way. You can 3D print stuff. You can you can export assets and use them in further suites. So definitely we had that vision that it has to be able to do that. And then we are working with our legal departments in that, in how to have a system that allows that to be fluid and usable and exciting and so definitely the answer is yes. Dream wants to be able to talk to the extended version. We start first, the first wave of the project being within its ecosystem, but very quickly, because the PlayStation has a share button that exports videos. We have tools that export screenshots and imagery that you can take in Photoshop and paint over, or you can make a model that you can export. We've got that pipeline, and the Dream will start with a version of that, but then we will build on it. So it's like higher and higher quality and work out the intricacies of that process. But the technology is there.
All right, I'm very sorry to say that that's all the time we have for today. So I'd like to thank Kareem for that. That was amazing. Thank you for your questions.